I was interested in talking to him about like we're growing the business. So, he was 7 years older than me, had more international business development experience. And I was asked, so, what about like, what do we need in terms of marketing material and clarity and talking to, sharing about our mission and all that stuff. And I remember him just rolling his eyes and just going like, you don't get it, do you? And I go, I'm sorry, I guess I don't. Like, what is it? He said, business is really simple. He said, all you've got to do is understand 3 words. And I go like, well, so what are that? He says, I got to this place where I was convinced that, you know what? Best business philosophy ever. Ride the tiger, get everyone excited doing spectacular diving catches at the last minute. We would cheer the diving catches. We would go like, woohoo, way to go. You saved the day. Until I'll never forget this.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, Jean Moncrief, and today's guest is Carl Saunders. He was the founder and the CEO of a company called VORUM, a medical technology company that really revolutionized how prosthetics and orthotics are made. Carl shares his journey from what he termed riding the tiger, a very chaotic management style that got him to 5 million in revenue, but then they hit a plateau. And he talks about how he had to change systems to build a system and the structure that helped the company grow to 10 million and beyond, and ultimately a very successful exit. In this episode, we discuss the power of purpose, how implementing daily huddles and one-on-ones transformed his business and the whole culture within the business, and helped to make a critical shift from making 95% of the decisions in the business to empowering his team to take them on instead. Carl's candid story also talks about how he got to that point as a desperate CEO and ultimately kind of went down on his knees to beg for help from a coach, and how without that help, these changes may have never happened. So here's my conversation with Carl Saunders. Hope you enjoy it. Hey, Carl, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. It's really great to have you here today.
Yeah. Great to see you, Jean. Thanks for reaching out. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, really excited to hear about your journey. When I was thinking about putting this podcast together and when I started thinking about writing the book, you were one of the people that kind of was the catalyst for that. So there were a few people over a period of time, 12-month space, I guess, that really kind of just helped me connect all the dots. And I'm very grateful for that. And I've been excited to get you on the show. So why don't you tell us a bit about VORUM and the business and a little bit of background about VORUM?
Sure. Well, that's thanks for the kind introduction. That's really appreciate that. So VORUM is a medical tech company. We formed it in 1989. And at that time, for the prior 5 years, I've been working at the University of British Columbia on technology to essentially fit amputees with artificial limbs in a better way. And by better way, we wanted to go take the industry from plaster casting and modifying, as an artisan in plaster, to digital. So we would scan the patient's limb, bring it up on a computer screen, and let the practitioner do his modification work, his design work effectively on screen, and then produce the mold on a numerically controlled machine. So that was the idea.
Was this kind of pre-change of the limb, or?
So this would be after. So this would be once the patient had already had the surgery. So now they needed a prosthetic device to be able to ambulate, basically be able to walk around or run or whatever.
Okay, and so you do a scan of the limb.
That's right.
So you get the exact kind of fittings and dimensions.
That's right. So we would get the full 3-dimensional shape of the limb. Okay. And so from there, that would then appear on the computer screen, and then the clinician would be able to sculpt on that image how they wanted the limb to be supported in a prosthetic. And so the notion there, in some cases where you have healthy tissue, you want to make sure that that's the tissue that's used to support weight when the person's walking. other areas where you have bone near the surface of the limb, you want to kind of avoid those so you don't have friction and breakdown of the skin. So those are the things that the clinician is managing when they're trying to
Okay.
sculpt the actual, the term is the socket, but that is the
Okay.
socket that fits on the limb and the socket attaches to the rest of the prosthesis. Of course, though, unless the fit of the socket to the limb is good, the rest of it really doesn't work, right? So having that custom fit is really one of the key elements to having a successful clinical outcome.
So you folks are really changing people's lives. I mean,
Well, we because we supplied the technology to make the devices, we were kind of doing, it was sort of like a twofer in some ways, right? Because we're changing the clinician's approach. So think of the
okay,
clinician who is an artist, or we think of
got
them
it.
as sculptors. They're working with their hands in, a plaster medium, right? So now we're asking them to actually not use their hands. We're asking them to use their eyes and a mouse on a 2D screen to make a 3D
Oh,
thing.
wow. Okay.
So we're changing their lives for sure.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, what about the patient, right? The patient themselves. So the notion being, some of the clinicians that were excellent at doing things with their hands, for them to even imagine trying to do this on the computer was a horrendous leap of faith. So in the initial stages, the clinicians that were really great, they didn't want to have any part of this because they were already getting good results clinically with their hands.
Gotcha. Yeah.
What the breakthrough became is, well, what about all the patients lining out the door who want to see you because you're that good? Or what happens when you retire? What happens to all the skills that you have fitting people and getting great results? So that became the approach that we then had to shift to, because it was all about, instead of you being limited, I'll just use an arbitrary number, being limited to seeing, say, 4 patients a day, what if using technology, you could actually see 10 or 20 a day, right? And that would mean that your impact, if you like, is now multiplied through the technology. And with the analogy we used to try to move those clinicians initially was talking about how dentistry changed in the initial stage. When I was a kid, the dentist did everything. The dentist did the cleaning, the dentist took the x-rays, the dentist did
Yeah.
all that. Not too long after that, they brought in specialized people to do cleaning. They brought in somebody to do the actual x-ray work. So the dentist only did the stuff that the dentist really had to do, where that was their their actual, if you like, superpower in their skill set. And it was, the idea was, that meant dentists could now see way more patients in a day than they could see if they were doing everything. So we then tried to take the same approach, educating the field initially, that this meant that the best clinicians could be leveraged into the community. More patients could get a great device because the great practitioners' productivity was going up. That was the story that we went to move the market on. The challenge, as you know, when you're the pioneer in something, you can look all around for other pioneers, and they're usually the ones with the arrows in the backs in the desert, right? so
Yeah. You were making that crossing. Yeah.
And it was so hard because now, just again, trying to get people to think about, well, what is this worth to us? What are we going to pay? Like, there's so much it's hard to learn. So the adoption was very, very slow, very slow. So we were the first ones in the market, and we lived the pioneer's lifestyle for several years.
So it's back in '89. You're
Yeah.
essentially a startup,
Yeah.
working from your garage kind of thing.
Yep.
Although it may not, I'm not sure if it was in the garage, but that kind of story. And it's
Yep.
7 years without huge amount of funding to find traction or
Yeah, so I guess what I should have better context would be, I actually started in the university in '79, so we had university academic funding for those first 7 years,
okay.
and then I started the company at 80. Sorry, I got those years mixed up. So '89, '82 in there, yeah. So we had academic funding for the first 7 years. Then I started a company, and then it
Gotcha.
was
Okay.
like, yeah, then it was the first 3 hires, and then basically scratching for every dollar we could, to get the things going. Yeah.
And it's you and a partner who started the business off together.
So the first 2 years, I didn't have a partner, but fortunately, we met. I met an individual at one of the trade shows, and they were. It was actually interestingly a trade show in the U.S. They were a German company looking to come in. They had some three-dimensional milling technology, but they didn't have any scanners, and they didn't have any modification software. So we kind of were. Went to each other's booths, and we said, just a second here, maybe we can work together. And maybe this would be a marriage in heaven, because you're in Europe and we're here in North America. So if we can, work with each other's technology, we can complete a suite of equipment. And on top of that, we have representation on 2 different continents. Like, how good could this be? Right. Um, what we underestimated was that the CEO of the German company detested the idea of being dependent on a Canadian company for key technology. So started pretty much after a year to try to put things together at their end, to replace our stuff. Meanwhile, his head of business development was going like, are you crazy? Like, why would we spend money doing this? We've got an ideal partner whose expertise is that, right?
Yeah.
And so, bottom line, probably about a year after they started doing that, the CEO of the German company fired the business development guy because he said he had mixed loyalties. And so I reached out to him to see if he'd be interested in coming
Getting
to work
together.
with us. And from that point, it was a great setup, because we met a couple of times, and he said, well, I'll come work with you I have a couple of conditions. And one was, you have a young family, and so you can't travel. So I'll do the travel. Two, you need to see customers where they are. So that means I'll do the sales. And three, you can't afford me, so give me a chunk of equity to start.
Okay.
so,
So that's how it happened.
so that's how it started, and then basically the gun went off in the race, right? Because the German company already started 18 months before trying to build software and scanners, and he came in and said, "You have to build a carving machine now, as fast as you can." And so the the way the story ended is we ended up having a full suite of equipment of our own within 18 months. And the German company never was able to really do the software they needed to compete with us. So we ended up being able to get traction from there.
It's kind of another lesson in the value of looking at those strategic partnerships. And yeah, good lesson.
Well, I think it's interesting too, because you said the strategic partnerships, and it's also a lot about, again, as you and I'm sure have seen, really understanding the person, like the person behind the company or the person that you're dealing with, like what really motivates them.
Yeah.
And if I had done that early on and really understood that early, it would have been so obvious that this was an individual who had no interest really in having partnerships. It was always going to be, an interim step till they could basically take us out. But I didn't do that work at the beginning of really get to know your customer or really get to know your key partner early.
Yeah, it's easy to look back on those kind of things and sort of connect the dots. But
Totally.
I suppose, you were in the right place at the right time, and it happened for a reason. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, VORUM is really born out of that.
Oh my goodness. I mean, that's such a great insight, because if I look at my career onward, it always seemed that somebody somewhere came in at just the right time. So yeah, I'm a huge believer in all you need to do is keep moving one foot ahead of the other, right?
Yeah.
Keep moving forward. If you keep moving forward with good intention and clear goals, things fall into place. It's remarkable.
you guys move forward, but in a kind of chaotic sort of style in a way. I mean, I remember
So,
first time we talked, you were talking about diving catches and riding the tiger, and so the two of you get together. What happens next?
well, that was because I mentioned, right? He said he'll do the sales, right? So I was back, in Vancouver working with the dev team. So I was responsible for dev and ops. So that seemed like a great setup. And then I was interested in talking to him about like we're growing the business. So, he was 7 years older than me, had more international business development experience. And I was asked, so, what about like what do we need in terms of marketing material and clarity and talking to, sharing about our mission and all that stuff. And I remember him just rolling his eyes and just going like, you don't get it, do you? And I go, sorry, I guess I don't. Like, what is it? He said, business is really simple. He said, all you've got to do is understand three words. And I go like, well, so what are that? He says, ride the tiger. That's what it is. That's business. You go
It's
out.
our strategy.
I go out. I talk to customers. I find out what they need. I sell them what they ask for, and we ride the tiger. And I go, well, like there are times when you send something to me, like I'll get, an email from you or something that says Thailand, $250,000 deal done, April 1st. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what's in the deal. I don't know what they need to do or anything. And typically, after you've got a business trip like that, you like to take a break for a week or so. So I don't hear anything from you for another week. So that's another week lost in terms of saying this. Don't worry. You got a good team. You guys will figure it out. You'll get it delivered. And we did. We did deliver it, which was amazing. So it was tremendously like energetic. It was never a dull moment. I had people some days crying with like we can't do this. Why did we commit to this? I had other people in the organization going, oh, if it was easy, it would have been done before. So that right all the time, and it was just like, and we were very profitable doing it. That was the other crazy thing, right? Because we kept solving problems that had not been solved. And if there was one thing about my partner that he was magical on, is he absolutely understood how to sell for value. He
Okay.
sold for value, right?
Which
So
gave you those high margins or the
yeah,
profitability that you're after. Yeah.
totally, right? Totally.
Yeah.
It was just incredible to watch. So we're trucking along, and and the interesting thing is he and I got along really, really well. It's like we would, if there was a problem that came up, he and I could talk about it, and maybe it took us a couple of hours, or maybe it took till the next day, but it rarely took more than a day to figure out what we needed to do. So we had a very, very complementary mindset and skill set that we were able to get things to go. So I will absolutely say, we had a ton of fun. We created so much stress for sure. And I got to this place where I was convinced that, you know what? Best business philosophy ever. Ride the tiger, get everyone excited, doing spectacular diving catches at the last minute. We would cheer the diving catches. We would do like, woohoo, way to go, you saved the day. Until I'll never forget this. I was in a CEO roundtable, and one of the guys at the CEO roundtable just said, like, is that really what you want to celebrate? And I was dumbfounded. And then his next question was, how scalable do you think that is? Whoa.
And yeah. And it was kind of a light bulb bump.
Totally. Totally.
We've
Right.
been trucking along, but we actually have no idea where we're going.
Yeah.
And we're kind of looking for fuel stops along the way, but that was
Yeah.
it.
So totally. I'm sitting there going like, and not only a light going on, but also, I don't know even how to describe it, but just sort of this notion internal, almost embarrassment, if I can put it that way. Like, or and maybe it's all around like, how could I have not seen this for so long? Like maybe there's a pride element in that somewhere,
Yeah.
just like how could I have been so, I guess the notion that people talk about blinders being on, right? How could I have been so blind? Maybe that's the better way to put it.
And just not seen it. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
you're with that round table where your peers can actually turn around to you and you can be vulnerable, and you can also at the same time, I guess, kind of turn to somebody and say, well, hang on a second, is that actually the best way to be looking at this?
Totally,
Yeah.
right? Totally. So yeah, so that was the run up, and then the interesting thing that happened there was, we got ourselves to kind of about 5 million in revenue, low 20s in staffing, and then we were kind of like we weren't going anywhere from there. Like we were working hard, really hard, and we just couldn't seem to crack that. We were bouncing around,
So you're
between
still
sort of
riding the
4.8 and
tiger,
5 months on. Still riding the tiger. Yeah. Still,
but the tiger's not going beyond
it's
that
not going
plateau.
beyond that. No, not. And it was like, wow. And so that was then my partner said, okay, let's sell the company.
When,
Okay.
when is this? About
So that
2010,
would,
12?
yeah, 2011 in there. Yeah,
2011, yeah.
2010, 2011, 2012. Yeah.
Let's sell the
And
business. We stuck
let's
at
just sell
5
the
million.
business.
Let's sell
Yeah,
it.
we're
Okay.
doing good. We're profitable. This is good. We're in a good place. I'm 7 years older than you. I'd love to have the extra time. So I go like,
How are you feeling about this at the time? Are you,
well, the great thing, when I mentioned about us getting on board together, one of the things we did at the very beginning together is we said, when we get to when we feel we've hit a certain valuation, what we could get for the company, we will sell the company.
okay, so you'd been intentional about that
We
from
had
the
we
beginning.
had done that from the day one. So that was a really good thing because,
Yeah.
again, over the years and talking with others, I've seen situations where, people get together, especially in startup stuff, and they talk at that time about what they'll do and what their intentions are. With time and with failures and successes and people change, it's really tough necessarily to come back. But we were super clear that we were going to sell the company together. So that
And
was
you had an
really good.
idea of what that kind of
We
valuation
knew
would be where,
we knew what number we needed. Yeah, we
yeah.
had already established a number.
So you were riding the tiger and you did have some kind of direction.
Totally,
It was,
totally.
okay.
Build it up,
Look it
and
up.
then
That's it.
and then the crazy part of it now, again, the benefit of hindsight, he says, and we don't want to pay people to help us with that. We can do that, right? So I said, so when you say we can do that, who exactly do you mean?
So no exit team.
Oh, no. So we don't need that. We can get our own accountants. We can get our own lawyer. We can do all that. Anyways, I'll fast forward that. So that was a year of an incredible, like anybody who sees this will just go like, how dumb could you have been? A year of unbelievable hard work. Like we were working hard before. Now it was like, we were both doing 2 jobs before. Now it was like I was doing 3 jobs, trying to pull all this stuff together, figure out the agreements. It was a nightmare getting through, and ultimately it failed. We didn't get a deal done. So that and in doing that, as you can imagine, because everybody tells you what will happen, is we took our eyes off the business.
Yeah.
So in that 18-month period that we were working on trying to get a deal done, the business, faltered and the margin, our revenue dropped some more and our profitability dropped some more. And it was like, oh,
So instead of
what
having
are we
a team
doing?
focusing on that and you guys keeping your eye on the ball on the business and kind of doing the right things from a business perspective, you distracted and pulled away to
Totally.
work on this deal. Yeah.
And back to that whole notion of, and I think there's many companies that are in a similar position when they're in that kind of $5 million zone and they, especially if they grew up from startup, is partner and I were making like 95% of the day-to-day decisions, right?
So no
So
leadership team, the two of you that
no,
essentially,
just,
yeah.
yeah. So us. So if we're off distracted trying to get a deal done, is it any surprise
Yeah.
that things fall to the wayside. So so that was really hard and exasperating along the way. And so then um, he basically said, I need a break. I said, you need a break now? I said, yep, I need a break. So I said, okay, well, I will be back at the ranch and start working things back up. Came back and said, okay, I'll try to get us back where we were. Worked for, I guess it was going to be probably about 6 months. And we were kind of working our way back. He said, no, it's boring. I want out. Okay, you want out? So tell me more. And he said, yeah, out 6 months is okay. And yeah, you can buy my shares. Like, wait a minute. And so something is just not,
It's good that you can
aligning with
look back on these things and laugh.
well, what can you do in retrospect, right? So anyway, we worked something out, and so yeah, figured out something to pay him out over time, and he left. And then I'm realizing now I got a business that was 5 million, should be at least that, and now I don't even have a head of sales. So right, so I don't have a head of sales, and then I go and say, I mean, how do I actually find out about what's actually in, the pipe, like what's coming in and all that stuff? So I reached out to him and said, so just wondering, like, where's all that information and stuff? And he goes, well, uh, it's basically in my head, but feel free to call me anytime. I go, oh, geez.
No CRM system.
No, none, zero. So interesting. That was around the time where I went to one of the annual conferences up that actually occurs up at Whistler called Ace Tech, which is for CEOs and tech companies. And I went to that, and I went into one of the sessions around sales, and I can share today that I did not know until I went to that workshop what the letters CRM even stood for. So it was just like, I was like, oh boy, I think I'll just stay here and be quiet for the first half hour and nod my head like as if I knew. And then came out of that with a lead for somebody who could help me put together a sales organization. Somebody could help me set up a CRM. And oh, sorry, I meant to turn
Fine.
that up. Yeah, somebody who could do that, then actually set up a sales team with actual people. And then also realizing that this was like, if I'm already working 80 to 100 hours a week, and we're going to grow the company more, that's just not, it isn't going to work. So that was when I basically started looking to see, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, what are other people doing? Like, what tools, what systems are out there? I can't be the only one. There's tons of companies bigger than me that have been through this journey. What do I need to do? And that was where I ended up going to one of the growth strategies seminars put on by Shannon Susko. And that
Yeah.
was the first time I saw something that actually talked about um, leadership teams, that talked about CEOs and the leadership teams, like getting their time and life back.
Yeah.
And I'm going like, well, that all sounds good. And then there was this part of, you can do that and grow your business. I'm going like, wait a second. This sounds like pinch myself, right? This sounds like it. Yeah, right. Something like Wizard of Oz type thing. But yeah, so that was the first time at one of those growth strategy seminars that Shannon led that I got any kind of view to what might be possible.
So rumor has it that you were pretty desperate at that time and at the point of begging for Shannon to come on and to help you to turn things around, or to help you
Um,
to coach you.
as with all stories, there is a modicum of truth to that. In that particular story, just again, so you have some context, I actually went to 3 of those growth strategy seminars over a period of pretty close to a year to hear Shannon each time, because I need to hear things a couple of times
Yeah.
before they actually sink in. And to go back to what you're saying about the rumor, in some cases, those rumors are only partially true. But in this particular case, at the coffee break, I went on my knees in front of Shannon with hands clasped and begged her to
To
take
coach
the
you.
company on. But she said, but I can't. My slate is full. And I said, I can't get off my knees until you say you'll take us on. And she said, people are coming in. This is so embarrassing. I said, there's one way to solve this.
Just sign
Okay,
it.
I'll take you. So
So
the rumor is true. Yes.
yeah, you basically get to that point where you are so desperate that if this thing's going to work, I've basically got to build it up to 5 million again, I guess was kind of where you're at. You've got to build a
Yep.
sales team up. You have to build a leadership team up. And I'm guessing you have to pay back whatever you've acquired your partner shares for. So there's a massive amount of pressure on you.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because I think that you use the word desperate, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Because there's the notion of, there's this notion of too, like we were doing really well, so I thought we were pretty darn good. So like, this business stuff really isn't that hard, right? And then you coming to the realization, like, well, actually, we've been stuck for several years, working harder and harder. Nothing is moving. There is no prospect for doing better. If you're, as we both know, if you're not growing, it's just a matter of time before actually things start to fall out, like going down. So so it's like that the combination of desperation and going like, God, they're gotta find a way. Gotta find a way somewhere.
And it's not just about growth for the sake of the growth. It's growth for, I guess, the people who work for you who are looking for how they're going to grow, and for your customers, this fantastic technology that you've created.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you raised the people part, because that was another key piece at the time. Because one of my early mentors, I value one piece of advice in particular I've used my entire career. I met him in the early 80s when I was at the university. He said to me, Carl, always hire people smarter than you. And so over the time, we kind of dug into that, and it was really about finding people who were terrific in a particular area of skill or expertise or whatever, and just get really great people all the time. And so that was such tremendous advice, because as we grew the company up, we had terrifically bright people. The interesting thing was when we had a couple of years flat revenue where things weren't happening, I had a couple of those people come into my office at different times and go, I want to let you know, like, I like this company. I like what we do. I like that I get a profit check. I'm worried about what kind of growth there is for me in this company. And then I want to be clear. Carl, this isn't a threat. I just need you to know that I need to have a professional development component, or I actually need to go look somewhere else and take that piece as well and factor that in. So Jean, I got the point. Like, growth it's not an option. Like, if you have a company, it is organic. It's a living thing. It needs to grow, and for it to grow, the people need to grow, right?
Yeah,
And you
such
need
a good
to,
analogy.
and the people themselves need to have that desire to grow, which A players will do. And then it's on the company to make sure that it sets up, a path for them to grow. And so when you put those two together, growth is not an option. It's a must. You have to do it to have a viable, living, contributing company in a sustainable way for a long time.
So you basically get to that point where you bring on a coach. And how did you start finding that growth then? What happens? You bring Shannon in.
Yeah. It's interesting because now, again, with the benefit of hindsight, I think one of the things that we did is, or at least tried, I can go back to why I changed from did to tried in a minute, is that I don't know, I'm embarrassed to say this as an I, because I don't like to talk about I when I see the company as being a we, but I was, as the CEO, I was prepared to go all in on this new system.
Okay.
And I say that because now, again, with hindsight and retrospect, I see situations where companies struggle to go all in on something completely new. I think I went all in because of how desperate I was, if we tie
Mm.
that back, right? Um,
Such a good
so,
point, though. You're right. Yeah. There
because
is often a resistance to kind of just trusting it and going all in on something. But I've heard this somewhere else, or I've read that somewhere else, and kind of pulling in different directions rather than just
and it's, I will
trusting.
venture to say it's hard, it's hardest, it's really hard in tech companies.
Yeah.
Tech companies, our whole training in the tech space as engineers or whatever is to basically be skeptical from the outset. That's the mindset that starts. So
Interesting. Yeah.
if you try to bring something in from the get go, so when I said earlier, I come back to did versus try. So I had I was ready to go all in myself. My organization wasn't. There
Okay.
was a lot of pushback. It took quite a while before we got everybody willing to be and participating in all in, if that makes sense.
What were some of the big challenges that you're facing then with everybody wanting to be all in or getting everybody's buy-in?
So, first mistake that I made when I started off, working on Metronomics is I was so excited that I wanted to get this thing out that from the very beginning, after the first meeting, went in and say, okay, I want to introduce this notion of the daily huddle, right? And we
Okay.
have this daily huddle, and everybody thinks about it ahead of time, puts their information in. It's a 15-minute thing, fixed agenda. We have a cohesive part. We talk about, what we're stuck on, when we need help, and what we're going to do today. And then, so and it was like, it just seems like so great in terms of getting, just basically getting efficiencies up and whatever. And the responses, again, largely in my organization, majority of people in the organization were either engineers, engineers or computer scientists for sure. And it was like, well, that's 15 minutes we're going to lose in the day. Where will we get that back? You're talking about 50 minutes every day? We just lost
Mm.
almost an hour and a half of the week. Multiply that by the number of people in the company, 20. That's 30 hours we've lost, completely lost. What are you thinking? I'm going like,
So you needed your old
oh
partner to
my
sell the value
God.
in it, right?
That's right. I wish he'd been there for that piece. So the mistake was not understanding that really what I needed to do and what we need as a company to do is do the huddles initially with a leadership team only
Okay.
and get the leadership team seeing the value just amongst ourselves of how that worked for us at the leadership level, so that when it came to actually roll that out, it wasn't just Carl, who has just come
Yeah.
back from yet another seminar with yet another crazy idea, right? It was actually all the leadership team was working with their functional teams and basically sharing with how it goes. So, and bring it in that way. So the notion of as good as the system was, and as excited as I was about it, I didn't understand that it's, and as important as it was to get the company turned around, I didn't understand that I had to have baby steps to bring everybody on board. So that
Don't
was that was the miss, right?
don't turn on the fire hose. Change takes a bit of time and gradually
Totally.
take them through it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So that was a big part of it is skepticism on the part of the team, a whole history of me coming back from various
mm,
conferences going like, oh boy, another idea. Well, hopefully this one will, we won't have to talk about this in the next month or next quarter. So yeah, so that's kind of how that happens.
when we were chatting before this, we were talking about purpose.
Yeah.
And we were talking about, that was one of the difficult things for you to sort of get your head around, was what's the purpose, the reason this business exists, and how important that is for business owners. And I was really interested in you sharing your perspective on that with the audience or the listeners. What was that big challenge with you with trying to figure out purpose? Because I feel like it played a big role in the success of your business ultimately.
Yeah, it's so interesting to go back to the first meeting that I had with Shannon as a coach, and where that whole question of purpose came up. And we spoke earlier, you and I, the whole notion of, we ran our business on 3 words, right?
Yeah.
Ride the tiger.
Ride the tiger.
So and we built up a very profitable business on that basis. So, coming in with that, what would be the word? I'd either be legacy or bias, coming into the first meeting with that kind of perspective. It was like, seriously, purpose? Can we not just get on to the important stuff? Like, that was where, that's where I was thinking at the time, right? And so Shannon, as a good coach will do to get started, is, just, give me a chance, right? Just bear with me. Let's go through this. So, and it was interesting. The whole exercise was interesting because as soon as you can get people out of their everyday or out of their thinking and try to get a perspective. So, we have Christmas parties coming up, right, this month.
Yeah.
And you're at a Christmas party, and you talk to people at a Christmas party, and you just want to give them, like, a minute, maybe even 30 seconds about what you do. How powerful would it be if you could just speak to a purpose? And just that one example is just one thing, saying, oh, well, maybe this notion of purpose is different, or it's bigger than I thought, right? And so we would start to look at, Chad walked us through an exercise to have us think about that. It's still, being honest, it didn't land, for probably the first even year, I would say.
Took a while to land. Yeah.
And then, and to work on it, because not having the clarity on that meant there was work. And my purpose for starting the company was very clear to me. That was my purpose, though. That wasn't actually necessarily what the goal of the company was. And so I had to work through that as well.
Gotcha. So
it took time to actually get to a place. And what's really interesting is that once we, had something down on paper, you actually empower everybody in the organization when they go out to social events like Christmas parties, and people talk to them about what they do, and they can have a 30-second piece to talk about with a purpose. And it's kind of, I don't know, it just kind of bubbles in the background, and everybody kind of goes, huh. And then when you go to hire somebody, and the first part of hiring somebody, they talk in and they ask you to tell you about what your company is and what you do. When you have a clear purpose that everybody gets in your organization, then when you're talking to new people or new potentials in your organization, they kind of either get it and embrace it, or it doesn't resonate. But super helpful. It's super helpful in terms of bringing in new people, to bring in people that, frankly, look at, take the purpose in and go, you know what? I really want to work with a company that has a purpose like that.
Yeah, it attracts those A players that you're looking for, and it serves as a sort of pull for where you're trying to go. Totally. Which, to some extent, when you put your 3-year plan together, you tied your mission into sort of around the production, or the bringing down the amount of time you took to get a patient fitting done. I think from, was it 90 seconds to sort of 79, and it was all about the patient. Do you remember what your purpose was? I actually didn't ask you that. I was wondering. It's probably
so. our purpose was on the non-numeric part was basically to improve the quality of care for prosthetics and orthotics patients globally.
Yeah.
That was the general term. When we got specific, we would talk about, we wanted our impact to be measured by how often a patient somewhere in the world was fitted with a custom device, like just for them, right? Where our technology was the facilitator, right? There was always a clinician, so our technology is a facilitating element, and our goal was to get to 1 a second. That's what we were targeting, which was like that's our big, hairy, audacious goal. Was we used a number, right? 1 a second, and we started to track that, and it was really empowering. People wanted to know what's your number, what's your number this year? Well, it was, when we first did it, we did our numbers. It was like 1 every 120 seconds or something, and we worked our way. When
kept bringing that down.
Yeah, wow. When we sold the company, on the last day that I was in the company, it was 1 every 62 seconds. And so you just even your reaction, right? It was this notion of having something that right away, everybody, whether they're in our field or not, goes, wow, I get that. Like, you guys did something that had impact, right? And so that was it. So that was the whole scoop. And again, it was super fun for the people to talk about that with their friends, with their colleagues, with their families, whatever. It just became an element that everybody got. They got great energy back to them from, because it was something that people could relate to. And it meant that everybody in the organization felt that we were having, and it was real, we were having impact on the quality of care of patients globally. And it was measurable.
So you put these, you put a 3-year plan in place. You've got a clear sense of purpose now, and you've got something that's measurable. And you break through that plateau. You go from 8, you go to 10, if I remember rightly. Reflecting on that, what are the 3 big things, or the big things that made all the difference at that time? What from where you had been banging your head, riding the tiger, to starting to find escape velocity, I guess, from 5 million or breakthrough?
Yeah, great question. And I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to do 3 things. Sometimes we ask for 1, so three is generous. So I appreciate that right off the bat. One of the things that was dramatic was this whole notion of going from an environment where my partner and I were making 95% of the decisions to articulating, that we as a company needed everybody in the company to understand where we were going, so that if they needed to make a decision on any particular day with any particular customer or supplier, they could make it with confidence, right?
So it's empowering that whole the whole business,
the whole team empowered. So we went, to when we got to our 10 million, at that point, I was down to making less than 5% of the decisions. And everybody in their roles understood what we were doing, what we were trying to accomplish, and they understood where they contributed, where their contribution would be, and would feel confident making decisions on the line, as opposed to, great question. Let me see if I can get that to Carl. I know he's busy for the next 2 days. So would it be okay if we get an answer to you on Friday, as opposed to, you know what? I hear what you're saying. I'd like to consult with a colleague. Can I get back to you within the hour? An hour later, they call the customer and say, yeah, we can do that. I mean, right? So it dramatically changed the whole way the company worked. It dramatically changed the environment for everybody, and everybody was working towards being able to make the best decision for the customer and the company.
Love it. Yeah.
And
That's
so much so that just a segue. I think it'll make the point though, because we had our 3HAG set up. You know, it was actually on the software platform, so it was visible to everybody. And again, this time of year resonates for me. At the Christmas party, one of the employees stood up and said, "You know what, Carl? I think that if we hit our 3HAG, we should do something really special." And me, being Christmas, I had by that time at dinner 2 glasses of wine. And I said, "That's a fabulous idea. What should we do?" And she paused and she said, "You know what? You should take the company to Hawaii." And I looked at her and I said, "That is an even better idea. That's exactly what we'll do." And the place erupted, right? It absolutely erupted. What was interesting was the behavior afterwards, right? So afterwards, what would happen is somebody in support would take a call and they would talk to somebody about a problem they had. And then they would say, "How's things going? Things going like you've had a great year? Awesome. That's great to hear. I'm sorry, I can't remember. What was your year end? Oh, your year end's coming up like in a month. Um, I think there's some other stuff that we could help you out with if you're interested. Would it be okay to put you to sales?" "Yes." "Okay, hang on. Sales. Billy, call John Smith down in Tennessee. I think he can buy stuff." Right? It was like we
the
had
whole team was just
the
kind of operating.
whole
Yeah.
team was something like totally everybody, didn't matter where they were, was
Yeah.
actively trying to figure out if there was another sales opportunity somewhere, right? It was magical. Everybody from our receptionist through development to whatever was so excited to try to find more revenue opportunities. So our sales team went like it was as if we were multiplied out 3 to 4 times because every single person was trying to make sure that we either created a great customer experience right on the spot so they would be a future candidate, or that they tried to qualify them for a new product right now. So
Is it?
so it was and it's so much about getting the behavior of everybody in the organization, everybody pulling the oars in the same direction, right?
Yeah.
So that is
That
for
was number
me
one. Sounds like it.
number one for sure. That was number one. Number two, I will actually go with having the 3HAG in place, because the whole notion of having the 3HAG in place was it made things reachable, right? It was
Yeah.
the notion of like when we talked about a BHAG of 1 a second, it was like, oh crap, that'll take forever, if it ever happens, right?
Yeah.
Um, so the notion of, well, what are we going like if what does that mean over the next 3 years, and what do we need to achieve to get there? And it's like that notion of I can see it, like I can see that we can get there, right?
36
Um,
months away, 12
yeah,
quarters. Just, yeah.
yeah. So I think that was a big part of it, and the other part that I'm going to go with is this whole notion of um, weekly one-on-ones, weekly
Yeah.
one-on-ones with everybody in the organization, which basically meant that every week you would meet with your lead. Um, Again, very structured, right? What did you learn this week? What's on your mind? Is there anything else I can do to support you? 3 questions. Super simple, right? And you needed to prepare, like you needed to put that information in the day before so the lead could see it and then be thinking about it before you come in. The key, though, is that one-on-one was always for the team member, always for the team member. So if they came in and said, things are pretty good, I'm actually good, and then it would be like, okay, is there anything you want to talk about? And well, actually, I'd like to talk about this, or actually, no, today I'm good. I'd like to go out. That worked. And what happens is then when you come to the quarterly reviews or the annual performance reviews, if you do them, there's no surprises.
it's been
There's
happening every week. The
there's no
annual
surprises.
one-on-ones,
There's
yeah.
nothing comes out because if there was an issue, it would have come out in the one-on-ones and you would have dealt with it right away. So people are coming to their annual goal and like, you know what? Things are good. No surprises. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I mean, you started that with your leadership team. Because again, I go back to the
Yeah.
what you were saying about the huddles a little bit earlier. Was there this resistance that we're spending more times in sort of meetings? I think that was the first thing that goes through my mind. Or
Yeah.
had the company already got to that point where they'd kind of bought into it now, and it was really working well. And I suppose the second question I've got around that is, well, not so much a question, but I think just an observation. It's really about the individual. It's about making sure that they have got the support that they need to
100%.
do what they need to do. Yeah.
100%. And it's so interesting because again, I'm a little embarrassed to say this aloud. The main element holding up getting those one-on-one reviews done or getting them going was me.
Mm-hmm. So as the leader, it took you time to
So
actually get,
me, I'm going
yeah,
like, oh my God, everybody in the company has a one-on-one. That's a half hour. Like where does all that time go? It's just lost
yeah.
productivity. And so it took me, I want to say probably 2 years, maybe a little bit more before I finally, I'll say relented because that's what it felt like. And I started doing, but I had learned somewhat because I started doing it just with the leadership team and me to start. And gosh, no, it was like within 2 quarters, it was just so obvious how powerful it was. How powerful it was. Because again, every week they come in. And then if there's something that's blocking them or something that's on their mind or something they need support from me on, it was like, boom, boom, we just got it done, right? And the next thing, it just, it's like, it was a multiplier effect
Wow.
in terms
Okay.
of what the leads were able to do. And then I started going like, gosh, if everybody in the company is doing this one-on-one with their leads and the same thing is happening, like we are going to be able to do so much more because everybody is like they're on their game. Like they don't have
Mm.
some things, taking them
Yeah.
down a
So
rabbit hole, on
they're
something
all on
that's
the same
upsetting.
page. They're all in the same
Oh,
game. Yeah.
it was so great. And same things like we talked earlier on, this whole notion, like you can't grow a company without growing your people. You cannot. It's just not
They've got to
possible.
grow up at the same pace as the business. Yeah.
Totally. And so, you get early on, people got letting you know, well, this is good right now. I don't see myself doing this for, more than a year or two. You've got that information really early on, right? You're thinking about it going like, okay, I got it, right? Let's think about how we're going to grow, where there's going to be new opportunities. Imagine when you're in a situation where you're fully on board on this, you've got predictable growth and you can identify what are going to be the new employment opportunities within the company, and you can share what those will be ahead of time. Are you
Yeah. Like
crazy
Man
or what?
said.
Right? So all of this notion of the reviews, it creates this forum to really, really get to the heartbeat of everybody in the organization and elevate that, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you elevate that, you elevate the company.
So were you thinking about sort of succession or exit when you went into the coaching? Was that still on your mind? You'd been very intentional about it the first time when you were riding the tiger.
Yeah.
You now bring in the systems, you bring in the structure. Is that still something that was kind of on the horizon? Okay, we're going to build this business to 8 to 10. There's going to be an exit point, or
Yeah. I think what I didn't share was that when I started the business on the very first day, the first three people that we hired, I said to them, I just want you to know that this company, we're going to grow this company to something great, and one day we're going to sell it.
And
So
you're always
that was on
transparent about that.
that was on
Yeah.
the very, very first hire. And
Right.
the people that are with me, like in the company, the day we sell, 10% of the sales proceeds will go to them. So that was like from day one,
Okay.
back in 1989.
So
So
I was going to say,
sorry.
those folks who walked into your office and asked about their careers were probably also thinking about, if this thing doesn't grow and we ultimately don't exit, then okay. So there was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't. That's a great sort of viewpoint. I would be interested to know if I wonder how many people in the organization were actually thinking about exiting and getting a check. It wasn't something I noticed per se. I would periodically I would get questions at the town hall going, "Hey, Carl, just wanted to check in with you. Like, are you
We're
still
exiting.
thinking of selling? Are you still thinking of selling the company?" And my answer would be the same always. It was like, just to be clear, yes, I'm going to sell the company one day.
Mm.
When we were in the various negotiations at the various times that people came in interested in the company, um, nobody was informed that there was a potential sales process happening.
Okay.
So when the sale happened, it was news to everybody. Like they weren't shocked because they knew ultimately I would, but they also didn't know it was imminent.
Okay.
If
Okay.
that provides some clarity there.
Yeah. But you had been transparent about this all the way along, that
Yeah.
that was
Ultimately,
ultimately
yeah.
the goal.
And so to your question about, yes, so when the coaching came on, yes, it was the same question was asked. I said, yes, I want to sell the company one day. And I had a number in my head, that I'd like to sell the company at. The interesting thing was that, um, again, for me, a fundamental limitation in my risk tolerance was that, and it may sound a bit reverse, I had no interest in taking on debt or taking on other investors. And there's a long history of that. My father was an entrepreneur, started an aviation business, took in money, lost the business, broke up the family. So that's the Coles
Okay.
notes. So in my case, I had no interest in doing that. And one of the things that was interesting when we looked to grow the business more, one of the aspects was we reviewed is I mentioned the carving machines that we had. I would always build them to order because I was so averse to debt. We only built the machines to order.
Okay.
And then the new COO said, "But Carl, we could grow this business so much faster if we built up machines and had them in inventory, so that when there was an order, instead of shipping the order 90 days or 120 days after they're built, we could ship them out in 15 days."
Jeez.
And I'm
And
sitting there going, "Oh man, I don't like this." He was absolutely right, and we did that. Uh, the cash outflow to do that plus our burn was very stressful for me, and I could see that if the company was going to keep growing, there would hit a point where I wouldn't be able to sleep at night with the amount of stuff
okay.
going out. So that for me ended up being an element that said, once I realized I have to stick to my guns on my number, because once I get to my number, I should do it, because I'm going to be way too stressed to keep financing this company myself.
Okay. Yeah. And basically, that, having grown up and seen what your father went through, there was no ways that you wanted to. I mean, you need capital to grow the business, I suppose. So it comes to that point, and that was it for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
there are some things I pride myself on being a logical person. That reaction to debt was a pure gut emotional response that I could not
Yeah.
get rid of it with any kind of logical discussion with myself or with others.
Yeah. Okay. Makes a lot of sense. Well, just kind of rounding up. I mean, you're now exited and you're doing your coaching.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back, what are some of the things that you're noticing with business owners who are trying to scale it, trying to break through this plateau, this revenue plateau, that's holding them back?
I think the biggest factor is that and to be clear, I'm working with companies that are, under 10 million, right?
Yeah.
Right off the bat. So just for that alone, I see, the CEOs and the leadership teams being so involved in execution, so much in the whirlwind, that even when we take the day for planning or the 2-day annual to get out of that daily whirlwind and to try to look outside that, get outside that box is really hard. It's really, really hard. And what's even harder is the first day when you go back after one of those meetings and you go, I want to do something about that, but there's another whirlwind today. Like there's another, so that is the piece that I see or have bumped into. And it's everybody goes in with good intentions. The day after, they're back full on in dealing with executional elements in the business. Does that make sense?
I think I can echo that with you. And I was almost wondering how long it took you folks to find the momentum. Was it a year? Was it a little bit longer on your 3-hack journey? Because I see a similar thing where there is that whirlwind, that chaos that businesses are in. I'm thinking that over a few quarters, they slowly start to get a real feel for what it means to set a priority for a quarter, how that lines up with the priority for the year, how that lines up with the priorities for the kind of 3-year, their individual priorities, how the huddles tie into it, and how it all starts connecting. And then they start to kind of, the priorities get better and they start to get more focused on the priorities. They're still dealing with the whirlwind because they've come out of chaos and it's still there. But I agree with you, it takes a while. Right? Did you folks struggle through that in your first year, or?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think for me, it's really important to have some wins in that first year as part of the coaching engagement. And to me, the simplest wins to achieve come from the daily huddle. Because if you can get the daily huddle going and problems, stucks that prior to that, having that cadence in place might take days or God forbid weeks to resolve. You get the daily huddle going and basically can get stuff solved quickly. And so what that will do within the year is that it will give people a sense that if that's working well, give sense that they have a little bit more capacity at the end of the year than they did at the beginning. And so creates an opening for them to look at doing their priorities better or having spending more time to figure out what is achievable for the next quarter, as opposed to coming in and, just throwing it up in the meeting. Right.
Yeah, I love that. It makes so much sense. Okay. One last question.
Sure.
The podcast is called The Freedom Experience. What does freedom mean to you as an entrepreneur?
Freedom to me as an entrepreneur running a business means that you sleep well at night, knowing that the team is taking care of it all.
That's brilliant. Simple, to the point. And that's why we went into it in the beginning, isn't it? All the business that runs a team's running it.
Yeah.
Carl, thank you so much for coming on and spending time. And sorry, I went a bit over, but I really appreciate it. I loved listening to your story.
Okay. Really fun. Thanks so much for reaching out. Looking forward to seeing you back on this side of the pond whenever that's possible.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself.